Cool. Is everyone comfortable? Ready to learn some new things about remote work? Yay. I love the energy. Awesome.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, this is perfect. Cool. Yeah. So first of all, welcome, and awesome to see that there's quite a few people interested in this topic. I'm personally super passionate about this topic, so I hope that I can teach you a thing or two tonight about remote work and collaborating remotely. Yeah, I just wanted to give you a little bit of like history on this meetup group and you know why I'm organizing this. So basically, I've been working remotely since November, so I'm still pretty new to the scene. But what I noticed is I moved back to Amsterdam in November, you know, started working remotely, and I was kind of curious about other people in Amsterdam working remotely to see if we can exchange some ideas or, you know, just meet up for a coffee or things like that. But I couldn't really find a group with remote people in Amsterdam, so I figured, you know, just start one. So I started a meetup group, planned this event 2 months ago, thinking that I had a lot of time, you know, to prepare. And then I was still, you know, just making my presentation the whole day, stressing out, ordering too many pizzas, whatever. But we're here now, so that's really cool. Just a little introduction about myself. So my name is Maurice. I'm Dutch, but I used to live in Prague for about 10 months last year. And I moved there because I started working at a company called Productboard. I will tell you a bit more about that later. But then I moved back to Amsterdam in November, started working remotely, and have been enjoying that ever since. Thanks for that. Awesome. So far, so good. So yeah, just a little overview of tonight's program. It was also a meetup, so maybe I'm repeating myself here, but yeah, we're just in the welcome and introduction section right now, and then I will talk a bit more about how I'm building the foundations for remote work at Productboard, and we'll have a little break, and then Mike will talk about communication in remote teams, and then we'll have some time to chat and hang out and enjoy a drink together. Cool. So first things first, what is remote? So what do we mean by remote, right? Like there's a whole scale of, you know, things you can think of when it comes to remote work. So there's companies offering, you know, working from home every month or every week for a day, or there's companies that are entirely remote, like Buffer or Basecamp, where, you know, there's no office, there's no place where people kind of like meet or work together. Everyone is just somewhere on the world working on the same product or problem or project. So within that scale, I just wanted to kind of like make it a bit clear what I mean by remote. So for me, when I talk about remote, it's about fully remote teams, right? So teams where everyone is somewhere in the world or somewhere in the same time zone, maybe working together on delivering value to customers or delivering value to users, solving problems together, and things like that. Two other words that you might hear often when it comes to remote are telecommuting, which is a bit of like a dusty word, basically meaning, you know, the same thing as remote. And there's distributed. In my opinion, distributed is more about, you know, companies that have offices in different locations, but they still have offices where people work together, you know, being physically together in the same office. So for me, that's kind of like the distinction between remote, distributed, telecommuting, and that kind of stuff. So let's talk a bit about you guys. Who here works remotely at least once per month?
Your definition? Or?
In my definition, so yeah, like you're not in an office, so you're working from a coffee shop or from home or on a beach in Bali, stuff like that. Quite a few. Who's working remotely at least once a week? Okay. Who's working remotely every day? Nice. Cool. So there's two of us, so that's interesting. So in what capacity are you working remotely? So who of you is working as a freelancer or a contractor or kind of on your own terms? Okay. Who is working in a mixed environment? So a company that has, you know, offices, but that also allows for remote work. part-time or full-time. And who's working in a completely remote company with no offices? Okay, interesting. Yeah, and last one, in which role are you working, like either in an office or remotely? So who is an engineer, for example, like a software engineer or hardware engineer? Quite a few. Product managers? Designers? Anything else? Yeah, what is your role?
Sales and operations.
Sales and operations? More sales and operations? Cool. What else?
Testing.
Testing? Awesome. Anything that I'm missing?
Research.
Research? Nice. So quite a diverse audience. I like it. Super cool. Awesome. Yeah, so before I'm going to talk about what I'm doing at Product Board, I just wanted to point out two things that I read this month that I thought were interesting. As some of you might know, Buffer, which is also like a completely remote company, releases a yearly State of Remote Work report. And so one of the things that they mentioned in the report this year that came out like 2 weeks ago is that out of the 3,000 something people that they surveyed, 97% recommends remote work to others, which is pretty high percentage of all the people that they surveyed. But then the 3% of the people that didn't recommend remote work are people that work in mixed companies. So where there's offices, but there's also some form of remote work. And this was pretty interesting to me because I am in that situation. I've only been in that situation for about 4 months, so I'm also interested, to see the reasons behind this, and maybe I will stumble into the same problems as that these people had as well. Definitely something worth checking out. It's a very interesting report. Lots of questions, lots of graphs and percentages and stuff like that. Super interesting. And yeah.
Does that mean that all the people who don't recommend remote work are in those teams? Or
Yeah.
all people who are on those teams don't recommend remote work?
The 3% of the people that don't recommend it are in mixed
They're not
companies.
in any other, but there are more people that are on split teams who do recommend it. There are also people who are on split teams who do recommend it.
There are people that are on split teams that recommend it, yeah, for sure. But the people that don't recommend it are by definition on split teams, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and actually, so one of the causes that they identified there is that it's mainly people that are maybe the only person on the team being remote, and the rest of the team is in the office. And as you might understand, that might be a bit tricky because the in-office people have some kind of culture going on. They can go out for a beer or for a drink or for lunch, whatever. And then you being the one person that's remote, you're kind of excluded, maybe a bit left out. Might not be the best situation. Cool. And then, yeah, there's the 204 remote work statistics published by the company called FYI. They're also a completely remote company. And one of the things that kind of stood out there amongst, those 204 statistics is that by 2025, an estimated 70% of the workforce will be working remotely at least 5 days in a month. And I think they're talking about the US workforce here, but kind of shows that there's a trend going on where more and more people are starting to work remotely, at least partially, potentially even full-time. So that's pretty cool. Sweet. So let me tell you a little bit about what I'm doing at Product Board and how I'm working remotely and the team that I'm building there, because we don't have fully remote teams yet, but I'm building the first team. And obviously there's a lot of things to figure out. How are you going to collaborate? How are you going to communicate? How do you make sure that the company culture exists in those teams as well? So a lot of questions there, and I just kind of wanted to share with you how I think about it, how we're approaching it, and how that experiment has been going so far. First things first, what is Product Board? So Product Board is a product management system that helps you gather insights from your customers, from your users, and then it helps you to prioritize, what features to build on next. And it helps you to kind of rally everyone in the company as well as outside of the company around a roadmap. The company was founded in 2014, so we've been around for 6 years. I joined the company January 2019 last year. As I told you, we have an office in Prague, but also an office in San Francisco. And we recently announced our Series B funding, which was pretty awesome, $45 million US to help us dominate this product management market and help other companies get the right products to market fast. There's a link there. By the way, I will share the slides after the presentation in the meetup group as well. And yep. So yeah, so what's kind of the current state of remote work at Product Board? Well, as I told you, we have an office in San Francisco and in Prague. And we basically started in 2014 with our founder, Hubert, who's the CEO in San Francisco, and our co-founder, Daniel, back then being based in Berlin and then moving to Prague a year later. So some type of remote collaboration has always been part of Product Board. I guess in kind of my definition, this would be like a distributed situation. So 2 offices, 2 different time zones, lots of, working together online through video calls, online Slack, online chat tools and stuff like that. And this is actually, it's helping me a lot with, setting up the remote team, that we are essentially already kind of used to, working together online instead of always having to be in person. So yeah, we use a lot of the more popular tools these days, I guess, like Slack for chatting, Zoom for video calls, Google Drive, Notion, stuff like that. So why am I building a remote team? So I moved to Prague. I started working for Product Board, but then 6 months later, I wasn't really feeling at home in Prague. I was struggling a little bit to find my comfort zone there. I missed my friends and family in Amsterdam. So at one point, I kind of decided that I wanted to move back, but I really didn't want to stop working for Product Board because I really love my job there. I love the company and the people there. So I talked to my manager and I was like, hey, listen, I want to move back to Amsterdam. I really don't want to stop working for Product Board. Is there a way we can make that happen? And then he said, that was Daniel at the time, our CTO. He said, maybe this is a good time to start experimenting with remote work. That was really cool because, I get to keep my job, but also live in the city that I love. So a few months later, I moved back to Amsterdam and I started, researching a lot about remote work. How are we going to work together? What kind of changes do we need to make in our current processes? Do we need to set up any new processes and stuff like that? And obviously, we had to figure out how are we going to hire people? What kind of bar are we setting for remote people? Should it be different from people in the office and things like that? So how am I building that remote team? Well, as I told you, we had to raise the bar a bit for hiring purposes. So for our engineering team, we got 600 plus applications in 3 months for a remote full stack JavaScript engineer position, which for us was a lot because we're not that big. I mean, we're 130 people now, but we usually don't get 600 applications for one position. So it was a little bit of panic, a little bit of figuring out how to deal with all these applications. You still want to reply and be nice and whatever. So that took a lot of time. And then we had 50 plus screen calls. We still have 18 candidates in the pipeline. Unfortunately, we've only hired 1 engineer so far. And this is what I mentioned before, about raising the bar. With remote work, you really need people with the right mindset. You don't want to find people that want to work remotely so that they can drink margaritas on the beach in Bali and do some coding in between. That's kind of the typical digital nomad kind of image that some people might have, but it's obviously not something that's realistic or might really help you advance as a company. Although for some people it works, but yeah. So we raised the bar a bit. We're still trying to find the right people. We're 4 people now. I'll explain a bit more about the team later. And the way we approached it is that, we started by adding a new job position to our website, just so that people can actually see that we're opening up remote positions. Then we shared a job ad on Stack Overflow, which wasn't the best thing to do. It resulted in a lot of applications, but also people that, just send their resume because they want to have a remote job and then don't really care about the requirements. and stuff like that. So it was also, there was a lot of noise in there that wasn't really relevant for us. Yeah, pretty cool. So yeah, so we were looking for engineers, but we were also looking for, you know, product managers, designers, testers as well. And we found a few, which is cool.
You prepare questions throughout the presentation or at the end?
Throughout.
Okay. Considering the remote work is kind of forward thinking, why the sipping margaritas in between coding would not match? Because if you set your deadline and what needs to be achieved, then if the person achieves it in 1 hour or the 40 hours that you estimate, you in principle should not care so much.
True. Yeah.
You're using quite an old mentality. No, I need the person to stay for the whole 8 hours.
No, I totally get your point. I guess the thing that I was trying to say is that there's people that want to work for a cool company and want to do it remotely for, you know, whatever reason, which is pretty cool. And there's people that are just looking to make some money and, you know, sip margaritas on the beach without being super involved or excited or passionate about what they do, right? And the thing that I'm trying to do at Product Board is really create the foundations for remote work. So I need people that are proactive, that think along, and that really want to, you know, create those foundations with me. And that just requires a little bit of a different mindset apart from that. Yeah. Yeah.
Another question, is there going to be any comparison, like in maybe later in the presentation, compare this process to hiring on-site employee? And I can imagine you spend a lot of time doing that, and it's like the operational cost is really huge, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a good question. It's actually not in the presentation, but I can talk about it. So one of the things that's different is obviously you have a way bigger talent pool, right? With remote work, all of a sudden you have access to basically the whole world. We decided to just narrow it down to Europe because we have a couple of things in the process that we think are important. So for example, being onboarded in the office just to understand the product culture a bit better, or the company culture. Time zones are one of the biggest obstacles when it comes to remote work. And we don't want the first remote team to have to deal with that obstacle. So it's also about minimizing risks. So for example, you know, just focusing on Europe only is already a bit different when it comes to sourcing people. So that's one difference. And then the second difference is that the interviews are slightly different as well, because now we're not just looking for some tech skills or product management skills or design skills, but also a mindset that makes us feel, you know, we can trust this person to be remote, to have less guidance and things like that. With remote work, for example, you cannot really see what a person is doing, of course. You know, in the office, at least you have an idea. If someone comes in at 9 and they leave at 6, they have done something. You're still not sure what they've done. You have to have a lot of trust, of course, which is super important. But in a remote team, it's even harder to know. So you have to find the people that you can trust and that have the right mindset when it comes to being proactive and being self-disciplined and things like that. So we added an extra step in the interview process just to talk about these kinds of things. Yeah. And then one other difference is that all the interviews are being done remotely as well, apart from, you know, one step in that process where we would expect the candidate to come to either to our office in Prague, or we would go to them just to have a face-to-face chat and, you know, get to know that person a bit better. Both for us, you know, to get to know the person better, but also for that person to get to know Product Board a bit better. Does that answer your question?
Not completely.
Okay.
Because I would like to see, like, for example, what's the difference in, like, more or less same cost of hiring one remote employee this way and hiring a person on site, you know?
Honestly, I don't know about costs and stuff. That's all like people ops, HR stuff. So I cannot really share anything about that. Sorry, I think yeah.
So can you understand how do you understand that this person is actually this correct mindset to work remotely? Is there any like defined parameters?
In general or for us?
For you.
Yeah, so I think the things that I mentioned before, you know, some type of proactiveness, some type of self-discipline, self-discipline, being independent, and things like that. You know, it's still hard to find that out in like an hour or two interview. But yeah, we've kind of how do you call it, design the interview process in a way that we can at least kind of get a sense of that. And it's also already kind of like part of our company culture in general. So there's some overlap there, and there's, you know, things we do in the process to understand those values a bit better. So like one of the examples, for example, is if you interview a more senior person, they might have mentored someone or they might have managed someone, and, you know, diving a little bit deeper in how that went, you know, were there ever any conflicts? How did you deal with that? Those questions do in general already kind of highlight how a person thinks and what kind of their mindset is, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, did you manage statistics? Have you had to fire any remote developers?
Not yet. No, it's it's still too fresh. So yeah, we're 4 now, but we've only been 4 people since 3 weeks. So having to fire someone in 3 weeks would have been really bad. So yeah, not yet.
So on piggybacking on the question, the colleague in the back, what about contracts, for instance?
Yeah.
That's I think that's an interesting
yeah.
hurdle.
Yeah, definitely. Let me just
overcome.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, it's really hard. Contracts are really hard because what happens is that you either have to have legal entities in the countries where the people live, so you can actually employ them, or you have to have some form of, you know, contractor setup.
Yeah.
So what we do right now is that we have a contractor setup, which works. It's a bit more of a hassle for me, for example, because you have to deal with taxes and stuff yourself. But it's really tricky. Some companies have legal entities in some countries, so you can, you know, if you live in that country, you can work for them as an employee. But then in the countries where they don't have legal entities, you're working as a contractor, for example. So GitLab is a big, I think it was founded in Utrecht actually. They're fully remote, or they have some offices, but they're at least, you know, partially remote. And they have offices in different countries where you can actually, legal entities in different countries, so you can actually work for them as an employee. But then if you don't live in those countries, you have to be a contractor. Yeah. Cool. This was an interesting topic, I sense. Yeah, and then you get all of these questions around remote work, right? Like, what about company culture? What about team bonding, building trust, or measuring productivity, or whiteboarding sessions, or grabbing a drink after work? Like, all of these things are harder in a remote setting, right? They're not unsolvable. Like, there's still a lot of ways to deal with these issues, but people that are generally not super excited about remote work have all of these questions, and they tend to think that you are more productive when you're in the office, which might be true. Like, I'm not, you know, trying to debunk that statement, but there's a lot of questions that kind of come up when people think about remote work. So the way we're approaching this is that, as I told you, the onboarding, you know, we expect the person to come to the office in Prague, get at least a week of onboarding there, get a sense of the company culture, do some fun stuff, you know, with people on the team or, you know, other people in the company, and really dive a little bit deeper in the culture and the mindset that we have at Product Board. And then what we do is we travel back to Prague every 6 weeks. So basically we're all remote for 5 weeks, you know, just working together, doing daily stand-ups on Zoom, communicating a lot on Slack and things like that. But then every 6 weeks we travel back to Prague for a few days just to work together, be together, do some fun stuff, some team bonding, but also, you know, connect with other people in the company as well, because that's obviously also important. And just to get a better sense of the culture. And then one thing that we do, since we're, you know, now remote, based in Prague and based in San Francisco, is that we also do company offsite. So every year, you know, all of us go somewhere to just work together for a few days, have like big presentation sessions, strategy sessions and stuff like that. So 2 weeks ago, we were all in Portugal, which was really, really, really cool. And it just really helps, you know, creating that bond between the team members, making sure that everyone understands, you know, what are the next steps, and just do fun stuff together, because that's also important. And then one other thing, or actually a couple of other things that we do to kind of deal with these questions as well, is that we do virtual lunches, for example. So actually today we had a virtual lunch, which was fun. Like, it's just an hour of like eating lunch and then chatting informally, getting to know each other a bit better. I showed the guys on my team my bunnies, and one of the guys showed his daughter because he's just working from home. So he also has a lot of time to spend with his kids. And that just really helps, you know, to kind of create those bonds or strengthen the bonds in the team as well. Oh, I thought you had a question. Yeah, and then, so one thing about measuring productivity, something that's quite different from in-office teams compared to remote teams, kind of what I mentioned before, you know, you cannot see someone, you don't know what they're doing. So something that's way more important in a remote team is the output, right? Like, what is this person actually producing? Whether it's code or designs or some kind of, you know, roadmap or plan for the next few weeks or whatever, there needs to be some form of output. So the thing that you're really looking for is, what is that output? What's the quality of that output? And you're no longer really interested in, is that person, you know, at their desk 8 hours per day, or do they come in at 9 or do they come in at 11? The output is way more important. And yeah, and of course, you know, we have team meetings, we have daily stand-ups, we do Scrum, so we have planning meetings, we have retrospectives and all of these things. So there's still fixed times where the team kind of comes together and talks about, you know, the processes, comes up with the next steps for the team, and kind of aligns around the team goals and objectives. So yeah, how's my remote experiment going so far? Well, as I said, we're almost 4. We have our designer who's based in Berlin starting on Monday. So that's really exciting. We have a product manager based in Amsterdam. He's there, right there. We have an engineer who's based in Prešov, which is in Slovakia. And then there's me. So we're 4 right now. And it's pretty cool. We did the virtual lunch today, which was fun. We actually go on a team offsite in 3 weeks. So we will all go to the Czech Republic, where we rented like this cabin. And, you know, we're going to work together there for a few days, and do some fun stuff there as well. My aim is to, you know, have a team of about 8 people. So we're still looking for engineers that will join the team. And hopefully by the start of Q2, I can kick off the whole team. And we can start proving to the rest of Product Board that remote is awesome and that we should really adopt it as a strategy for growth. Which brings me to the next slide. You know, why is this good for Product Board in the first place? Like, why should they care about remote work? Well, you know, remote work is a strategy for growth. When I joined Product Board, I was employee number 54. 1 year later, we're 130 people. So we're growing really fast. And we're looking for ways to, you know, accelerate that growth. We just got that Series B investment. We're looking, you know, to really expand the company this year. And having 2 offices really makes you kind of stuck to those markets, right? To the people that are in those markets. And opening up teams to remote work really allows you to, you know, get people in from the global talent pool, which is really interesting. Or for us, for now, you know, the European talent pool. It's also a really, really great tool for increasing diversity. You can get, you know, different cultures in different perspectives, people with different experiences in different household companies in other countries. So I think that's also really, really cool there. And it's a great tool for employee retention in the long term. So, you know, when I started this experiment, a lot of people came up to me and they were like, hey, you know, how's it going with the remote experiment? Because maybe in a year or 2, I want to work remotely as well, but I don't want to leave Product Board. So if this is going to be a success, you know, we can get to keep these people. They can move somewhere else because, you know, they might want to settle down, build a family or stuff like that. And with remote work, we're now actually able to keep those people because they're not forced to leave the company just because they want to move back to, you know, where they were born or to a different city. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, just a quick recap. Something that I hope is valuable to all of you is that if you start a remote experiment, you know, reduce well-known obstacles. So, you know, time zones are repeatedly being mentioned as being a pain in the ass when it comes to remote work. So, you know, try to think of a setup where you can at least reduce those risks as much as possible. Yeah, we do one face-to-face interview during the hiring process, as I mentioned. Minimum 1 week of in-office onboarding, meetup face-to-face. We do it every 6 weeks. Some companies do every 3 months. Some companies do every 4 weeks. So there's some kind of flexibility in that. Always communicate when you're going offline during the day. I think this is really important. With remote work, it's easy to just go to the gym or run some errands, go to the hairdresser, which is all totally fine. But just make sure that your team knows and that they know what the expectations are and that they know when they can count on you and when you're not there. And just a kind of implicit policy that we have is always have your camera on when you do a video call. You don't have a lot of FaceTime, so when you do have a video call, just actually turn your camera on instead of just talking, because that's valuable face-to-face time that you have during the day with your team. And that's all, folks. Questions?
Yeah, I wonder why. Maybe just to compare, why don't you consider the asynchronous communication? I mean, from what I get is that okay, you're remote, but everybody has to be synchronous, right? In a way that everybody has to be online.
Yeah.
So instead of asynchronous, for example, like of course you have to be in the meeting and stuff, but normally people could be, for example, in Mexico or India, so there are some overlaps, but not 8 hours overlap.
Yeah.
I wonder what would be the differences in terms of productivity. Wouldn't that make differences or not?
In terms of productivity, I'm not sure, but we chose to do it like this because all of our in-office product development teams work like that, so they have daily stand-ups synchronously and stuff. And since I didn't want to introduce too many new things, new elements and stuff, I just wanted to kind of follow the best practice that we already have and then kind of, find our own way from there. So yeah, maybe at some point we might do asynchronous, daily stand-ups or stuff like that. But yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Are you involved in the contract negotiations?
In the contract negotiations, no, that's strictly something between the candidate and people ops.
Did you involve them in your experiment/project? Because I can imagine they get a whole bunch of questions about resignation laws, holidays. That's really different between all the countries in Europe.
Yeah, so actually the thing is, the contractor setup is really popular in Prague. Basically, in the Czech Republic, more people are contractors than employees because it's better for tax purposes. So our contracts are already kind of tailored towards the contractor setup. So they're quite explicit about how does it work with resignations or getting fired or probation period or stuff like that. So we're in a way lucky that the Czech system is a bit flexible because that allowed us to be already quite adapted to that.
And do you know if your HR department is flexible on negotiations, or are you really strict on this is the Czech way we do it and you have to commit to it?
Actually, I'm not sure. That's a good question. I don't know.
I've heard that it's a big help. That's a big help if the company has a good, well-documented internal knowledge system for any piece of content which people need. So ideally, of course, you build that up as you are aiming to be remote. In your case, it wasn't necessarily; it was more distributed setup. So, are you having any kind of obstacles there, and how are you approaching that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, given the fact that we are already distributed, we have quite a big internal knowledge system documented in Notion. We're not quite there yet, right? It's always hard to create such a thing, and especially as you're growing really fast, lots of processes are changing, and knowledge gets lost. But I think given that we were already kind of adjusted to that distributed nature, we are used to documenting more than average, I guess. Because that's really key with remote work, document everything, over communicate, make sure that knowledge is not just kind of floating around in someone's head, but write it down, make sure that people can find it. And I think we're already doing quite a good job there. Yeah.
The question, the contractors, including yourself, of course, by which model do they work? Do they get payment by hour, or do they get static payment? And if they get static payment, how do you measure time they spend on work?
Yeah, so it's basically just like regular employment. So you get like a monthly compensation or monthly salary, given or like kind of assuming that you work 40 hours ish, right? Like, but it's basically similar to employment.
And do people have to log their time? Like,
No, we really have a culture based on trust. So for us, it's not about, you have to be in at 9 and go home at 5:30 or, make long hours or whatever, but really, as a team, we decide, what we will work on this week because we have sprints of a week. And that's what you commit to, right? And me in the role of an engineering manager, if the work that is planned is way too, not enough for a whole week, I will flag that. But usually people are intrinsically motivated to get stuff done and add value and stuff like that. So the whole time logging thing is not needed if your company culture is really based on trust.
How do you manage accounting? Like, for example, people take days off, people take vacations, and so on.
Yeah.
You just register those times off.
Yeah, I mean, you can just request holidays and then, you go on holiday. But yeah, the thing is, we're a product company, right? So we don't work for customers. We build a product and customers use it because they love it. So we don't have to justify our hours to one customer or something. So I think we're kind of in a nice position there because no one is asking us to do something and then we have to do it for a certain amount of money. We can just add new features based on what we learn of users, that use the tool. And then we can adapt based on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh.
Sorry.
Go for it.
Based on your hiring process, how do you handle language differences? Like, great orders that just understand English. How
Yeah.
do you recommend the English orders?
So English is for sure, a prerequisite for getting a job at Product Board. However, what we also do, especially for people that are in the office, because in Prague, we have some people in the office that, they can, communicate in English, but it's not great. So we also offer language courses for the remote team. However, we haven't really figured that out yet. So, English is just a prerequisite for the remote team. In the office, it's a bit more flexible and we offer some courses as well.
One question, do you have any accounting based on features? So when you're having development, sometimes you have the internal budget that are set, this feature costs that much, this feature that costs that much, and you book time on that. You don't have that.
No, we don't do that.
I was wondering about, did you make a kind of a business case out of it? How much effort, time, etc. it costs you to do this remotely, or stick to a specific location and based on that?
Somewhat. So not super strict in terms of costs and stuff like that. But I did tell our leadership, I want to prove within the next 6 months that, remote work is going to work. And I want to prove to them, that we're as effective as the teams that are in the office, that we add, value to our customers. And that we also simultaneously create foundations for remote work so that we have a system that we can kind of copy paste to future remote teams as well. So it's not super detailed in terms of costs and stuff, but there is kind of like a business case with a deadline that I think is super important, that we can show the rest of the company like, hey, we've proven it and now we're going to extend the remote setup.
Is it like you expected, or do you see big differences in some areas?
Well, right now with more people on board, I feel like 6 months is way too long and we can prove it in 3 months because it's going so fast. We have great people on board that help a lot with thinking about remote, how are we going to hire, how are we going to work together, and that's just something that's really important in the hiring process as well, that you have the people that can contribute to that process. Maybe they have previous experience with remote work, and then we can leverage that experience to really ramp up that process.
Do you feel like sharing this report also externally? Because I can imagine that many people here or outside here would love to read your experiment and whether it works or not.
Yeah, I mean, I've written something on LinkedIn already about how we're approaching it. And, at some point, maybe in the next 3 months, I will also try to write down, how it goes, what kind of obstacles did we face, what worked, what didn't work, what did we need to adjust and things like that. But yeah, for sure, I will keep sharing about that.
one more question. And my company has got these small coffee dates where we stimulate like have small coffees with, I don't know, HR, finance. Did you know if you have a question about a certain topic, you know who to talk to?
Uh-huh.
How do you handle that?
Yeah, there's a great Slack app for the people that use Slack. It's called Donut, and it's exactly what you're mentioning. So it randomly pairs up two people every week or every 2 weeks. If you're in the office, just go out with them for a coffee. If you're not in the office together, just, jump on a Zoom call, have a chat for half an hour and get to know each other a bit better. It's a really awesome tool. It's actually super simple, but it really adds a lot to the company culture. Yeah. Donut.
What tools does HR have in your company to support your team? For instance, if they get ill, or personal development plans?
Yeah, so we have Greenhouse for hiring, which is basically kind of like a recruiting tool where you can kind of keep track of, which candidates are in which stage of the hiring pipeline. There's Cake HR, which is for everything related to sick days, holidays, things like that. And we're using, what's the name? Culture Amp to do like personal development plans and stuff like that.
Yeah, we talk about the noise on Stack Overflow hiring. What are you intending to?
Sorry, what was the last part?
So Stack Overflow that we use for your recruitment. Solely through Stack Overflow.
So you're asking about the noise on Stack Overflow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you use an automated hiring process or
So which other platforms could you use?
Yeah, we're right now looking at using, for example, Remotive, which is like a big remote job board. There's Remote OK, which is also kind of like a popular remote job board. And there's We Work Remotely, which is also a remote job board. And these three platforms, I think they're amongst the top 10 most popular remote job boards. So we will probably post the ads there as well to get some more people in.
But for now, you want to use Stack Overflow.
Yeah, well, the Stack Overflow ad, we disabled it because there was too much noise. So we're just gonna experiment with different platforms and see, can we kind of get better quality people in instead of having all that noise, because it just takes a lot of time to go through, 600 applications and 600 resumes and motivation letters and things like that. Yeah. Cool. Time's up, folks.